first thing you learn about in lesson 8.6 is about a thing called rationalizing the denominator. Let's say you're given a problem 1 over the square root of 7. Already that looks extremely difficult to solve, and it would take forever to do by hand, and it would give you a very long decimal. There's a much easier way to actually write this through a process called rationalizing the denominator, and we do this by multiplying the original fraction, which is 1 over the square root of 7, by 1. However, written the square root of whatever the denominator is, which is the square root of 7, over the square root of 7, because the square root of 7 divided by the square root of 7 is 1. So we're just multiplying it by 1. We're not changing the value at all. The square root of 7 times the square root of 7. So the denominator multiplies by each other and the numerator is multiplied. The square root of 7 times the square root of 7 is the square root of 49, which is the denominator, and then the square root of 7 will be the numerator, and you can simplify this as the square root of 7 over 7, because that can be simplified as just simply 7. Now, rationalizing the denominator can also be used when a real number is also part of the denominator, in addition to a complex number. So, I guess 2 over 3 plus the square root of 3. There's a real number and a radical there, and we can simplify that, but in a slightly different way than before. We wouldn't multiply it by 3 plus square root of 3 over 3 plus square root of 3, because they wouldn't cancel out and there would still be radical on the bottom. The way that you'd actually want to do it is multiply it by its conjugate, because that will cancel out any radical in the bottom. So switch the sign. The conjugate of 3 plus the square root of 3 is 3 minus the square root of 3. So always remember, since conjugate starts with C and so does cancel out, and so does complex, conjugates cancel out the complex numbers. So when these are multiplied together, 3 times 3 is 9. The radicals will cancel each other out, because 3 times the square root of 3 minus 3 times the square root of 3 is 0, so we can just ignore that. And then these two multiplied together is the negative square root of 3 times the positive square root of 3, which is negative 3. Then what my number on top will be simplified to is 2 times 3 is 6, and the square root of 3 times 2 is 2 times the square root of 3. Then we can simplify it even more on the bottom, so 6, and then you have your answer, 6 minus 2 times the square root of 3 divided by 6. Also notice in this problem, you can simplify it even more. Notice that there's a number right here. It's 2 times the square root of 3, and since both 6 can be divided by 2, and they're 2 6s, you can simplify it to 3 minus the square root of 3 over 3.